Kaitlyn Mitchell, a staff lawyer from Animal Justice, to be heard with respect to the same item, item 3 of the Standing Policy Committee on Protection, Community Services and Parks.
Joining us.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today about the proposed amendments to the Responsible Pet Ownership Bylaw. My name is Kaitlyn Mitchell. As you heard, I'm a staff lawyer with Animal Justice. Animal Justice is Canada's leading national animal law organization. And although Animal Justice is based in Toronto, I live here in Winnipeg. So we do have a lot to support in the proposed amendments today, and in the interests of time, I'm not going to go through each and every item in the proposed amendments, but I would just like to flag that there's a lot of really important proposals in there that would protect both companion animals and wildlife. So in the interest of time, I'll focus my comments today on the issue of lethal wildlife traps and rodenticides, as well as the regulation of cat and dog breeders. So to begin, I would like to share with the committee some polling that Animal Justice had done with World Animal Protection. I just want to confirm, are you able to see my screen there?
Yes, we
can
see it.
Excellent. So we conducted a poll, or I should say Nanos Research conducted the poll. Again, we did this in partnership with World Animal Protection. And I think that there's some really interesting results here that I just want to share on 2 questions in particular. So first, as you can see in the pie chart here, the Nanos Research poll found very strong support for the regulation of cat and dog breeders when they surveyed Winnipeg residents. And in fact, when asked whether they support the city regulating cat and dog breeders, including requiring that they obtain a permit to demonstrate a history of responsible breeding, 89.5% of residents indicated that they support or somewhat support the proposal, which is a really strong number. And I think it's also really important to note that only 4% of those surveyed were actually opposed to the proposal. And on the issue of the outdoor use of lethal wildlife traps, again, we saw strong support for the ban on the use of these traps. And as you can see here, when asked whether they support a ban on the outdoor use of wildlife traps in the city, 65.8% of respondents indicated that they either support or somewhat support such a ban in Winnipeg. So based on these results, I would suggest that when it comes to regulating cat and dog breeders in the city, as well as banning the use of lethal wildlife traps in the city, not only is supporting the recommendations put forward the right thing to do, but it's also a really exciting opportunity to bring our responsible pet ownership bylaw in line with the views and values of the city's residents. I have one more slide as well. So on the issue of wildlife traps, one thing that I did want to flag is that we're very, as I said, Animal Justice is very supportive of the recommendations, but there is one point of concern that I did want to flag, which is that in the consultation document that went out to the public in the summer, the proposal put forward was about prohibiting the outdoor use of lethal traps, which is a sort of broad category of traps. And that seemed to include a number of types of traps. That would include body hold traps or conibear traps that Brittany just spoke about, but also leg hold traps and snare traps. But the wording in the amendment that was considered last week was a little bit more narrow. It talked about a ban on body hold traps only. And I think that matters. And sorry, this is just some detail about the poll, and that I did provide that in advance. So hopefully if you're interested, you have that in front of you. But so these are 4 main types of traps that I have up here. And I realize that these are not pleasant pictures, but I think it's important if we're talking about traps that we know, what the different types are. So in the bottom left-hand corner there, you see a conibear trap. That is generally something that's called a body hold trap, and that would, I think, certainly be captured by the proposal that's being put forward. But my concern is that if it's just worded in the way that it prohibits body hold traps, it may not be clear enough that it prohibits these other types of traps also. And without getting into details, I think suffice it to say there are at least these 4 types of traps available. They all are indiscriminate. That is, they cause suffering to target wildlife, but also to companion animals, particularly when they're set in city limits. And so we would suggest that there needs to be clarity in the bylaw amendments, just to make sure that we're capturing all types of traps. And I think that when the bylaw itself is drafted, there is a number of ways that can be done, but we do just want to flag that and make sure that we're not inadvertently, leaving the message unclear to Winnipeggers about whether it's just conibear traps that are banned, and they can continue to use, say, snare traps or leg hold traps, or whether we're banning all of those types of traps. And Brittany covered the issue of rodenticides already, so I don't want to repeat what she said, but I would flag that we do need stronger regulations in this area. The consultation document noted that British Columbia has instituted an 18-month ban on second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides, and several cities in BC have actually banned them as well. So at the very least, we would like to see the city go forward with the proposal here, which is to restrict the use of rodenticides outdoors. But we actually would encourage you to go further, because there is, not only suffering caused to all animals who ingest these poisons, as Brittany alluded to, but also really serious risks, not only to companion animals, but also to wildlife. So for instance, a study in 2009 found that of 164 owls in Western Canada whose bodies were studied, 70% has residues of at least one rodenticide in their livers. So we know that these poisons are traveling throughout ecosystems, particularly when they're used outside. So I think that it is really important for Winnipeg to make sure that we're protecting all animals throughout the ecosystem from these poisons. And briefly then, just turning to the issue of cat and dog breeders in the city. Unregulated cat and dog breeding is a serious problem here and throughout Canada. And we have a number of concerns. We've set those out in our written submissions, so I won't repeat those. But I would note that in addition to the conditions that are set out in the recommendations, we have put forward some other recommendations as well in terms of how to make sure that any regulations that the city puts in force targeted at cat and dog breeders are effective and really protect animals. And one of those examples, or one of those suggestions, just by way of example, is that I know in the amendments, the proposal is that if an individual has a breeding permit for their cat or dog, that the breeding permit would last for the animal's life. But the proposal also suggests that there would be a limit on the number of litters an animal can be made to have, which I think is very important. So I would say that probably there should be a time limit on a breeding permit to make sure that an animal isn't covered by a breeding permit throughout their lives and is then subject to potentially accidental or intentional pregnancy beyond that which is allowed in the regulation. And just one point as well, as a lawyer, I just wanted to flag that the Provincial Animal Care Act does have a licensing regime for cat and dog breeders, but two very important things there. One, it is not as stringent as the proposals being put forth here. It only applies to larger scale operations. But two, that entire licensing regime was suspended in 2012 and it remains suspended to this day. So there are not provincial licensing standards. And I just wanted to make sure that point was clear so that there wasn't any misunderstanding and thought that perhaps this was duplicative of the province, because it simply is not. It is sorely needed. So I will conclude there, and I do thank you again for the opportunity to present today and for considering this proposal along with all of the other very important proposals that are before you today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We have a question from Councillor Mays.
Thank you for the presentation. You said a number of very detailed things about traps there. I'm not sure I got all of them. Some hours from now, we will come to this item on the agenda. Our staff will be accessible. What is the, if you can give me one question, the different leg hold, a lot of different traps are referenced there. I understand you're concerned. What question would you want me to pose to our staff? Just to try and get clarity on the point you made.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for the question. I do appreciate it's a lot of detail to go through in a short period of time. So I think the fundamental question that I have is, what types of traps are we intending to prohibit here? And will the wording capture, all of these types of traps? I don't, and again, I leave this to you. I don't think that the bylaw necessarily needs to go through and itemize the types of traps that are prohibited, but I think if the wording was something a little bit broader, like any restraining traps or lethal traps, that would really give the clarity that Winnipeggers need.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, have a great day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, you too.
I think we'll have time for one more delegate.
Okay, well, we have Michelle Caden. Michelle speaking with respect to